Hello, welcome to Enlightened Empaths, your community for the spiritually awakened. We're very excited to begin a 2-week topic on dodging energy vampires with you today. We've got a lot of great information to discuss with you. So if you're in a place to do so, take out pen and paper because we think you're going to want to take notes on some really great facts and stories we're going to present to you about how to dodge the energy vampire in your life. Denise, did you enjoy talking about this topic with our guest we're going to introduce next week?
It was incredible. And it was so, I have to admit, I was very, very nervous about talking with her. I felt intimidated and like, oh. And once we started, before we got on, because we usually talk to folks for a few minutes before we actually start recording, and it was so easy and genuine and true. I thought it was a very fun interview to do.
Me too. So you guys are probably listening going, the hell are they talking about? So next week we're going to share our 1-hour interview that we did with Dr. Christiane Northrup. Her newest book is called Dodging Energy Vampires, an Empath's Guide to Evading Relationships That Drain You and Restoring Your Health and Power. Now, I have read so many books on energy vampires. I have read everything really you can read out there on sociopaths and psychopaths and borderlines and all that stuff because I've had lots of interactions with them throughout my own life. And I've loved all of those books and I've learned from every one of them. But what I really liked about Dr. Northrup's book was that A, it was so focused on the empath, not just the energy vampire, and B, she really talked about the physical health implications as an MD herself that the empath goes through when they are interacting with an energy vampire. And that's what we hope to kind of go through with you all today. What we thought we would do in today's show is kind of give you our take on the book and what we learned from it and hit some of the major points of the book so that hopefully when you tune in next week to hear our interview with Dr. Northrup, you'll have a really good basis for what we discussed with her. So let's start with talking like an overview of who are the energy vampires in your life. Do you want to kind of go through the list of some of the things she talks about?
I would love to. And one more thing about the book, it's a wonderful read. It's not heavy, it's not dense, it flows beautifully. She has a nice writing style. So for people who are avid readers and also for people who may not be, it's a well-written book. I just wanted to throw that in real quickly.
I read it in an afternoon sitting on the beach.
Yes. I mean,
it's a quick read.
It is. It's a quick read, and it because it makes sense and it resonates as well. Like it was another one of those books that I'm reading it and nodding my head like a bobblehead, like, oh my gosh, she gets it. She understands this. And giving what I love to is, well, we'll go into this in a minute, but how many actual techniques she gives in the book that you can use, which I think is incredible. All right. Recognizing the energy vampires in your life is obviously the first step. And I think so many of us have been worn down or double guess or whatever, but she gives a list of some very specific things that can this person take criticism? A lot of times people who have a vampire type energy are very charismatic and looking good. So if you confront them on any weakness that they may have or suggest an area of improvement, it could result with someone stonewalling you or retaliating with rage. They don't want to hear it. It's about ego. It's about image. Big one that I don't think will be a surprise to anyone is, are they manipulative? All vampires use manipulation to get their needs met for their narcissistic supply, but it can be in the form of attention, it can be a form of money, it can be sex, it can be status. So we can never emphasize enough how insidious and manipulative and controlling these people can be. And
I think most of them, their favorite form of manipulation is gaslighting.
Yes.
Oh, you're too sensitive. You misunderstood me. You always react that way. You see the world differently. You. They don't take any ownership, and so they manipulate by twisting what actually happened or putting it back on you.
Right, and they refuse to take responsibility for their part in it. or their behavior, or exactly what you just said, not only the gaslighting, but the moral compass, things that you and I would never, ever consider putting on someone, they do without another thought. It's just reflecting it. The moral compass thing is huge, because from my personal experience with some very significant energy vampires in my life, they talk a really good story. And if people meet, even to this day, if people meet the people that I'm thinking of right now, what a nice guy, would do anything for anyone, she's a wonderful woman. But it's not genuine. It's all about making them look good so that they can keep the other behaviors going.
Yep.
Now, this was one of the things that she brought up, and she said the brain empathy circuits aren't very well formed for an energy vampire. And that's always fascinated me. And I shared this on another show about working with severely emotionally disturbed students, and how the whole room full of kids had a frontal lobe injury. And that's where you process your emotions and consciousness and all that kind of stuff. And I always thought that was a weird analogy. So when she said, made it into a brain chemistry thing with this comment about empathy circuits aren't very well formed, I thought that made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, this one, I'd love your take on this one. She said support, love, and therapy won't really help them. It can sometimes make matters worse. And you're always a huge proponent of, suggesting therapy and how it's been helpful for you and for other folks in your life. So that, I think, is a little tenuous grounds of, because, and this, I don't mean this disrespectful to anyone, but like, say you go to group therapy with someone, it almost makes it look like you're the energy vampire, not the person who actually is.
Yeah, she even says that in all of her years, she has come across one energy vampire who changed in therapy. But she takes an entire page to explain how rare that is. Right. So her belief is that, there really is no therapeutic help for them. And all the research I have done has proven that to be true, that they will go to therapy as a way to keep you in their, energy supply, but they won't actually take the action steps needed to change or compromise or make any amendments or to validate any pain that you have been through. So when I advocate therapy, I'm more advocating therapy for the empath. Because these energy vampires manipulate so well. It's almost like, when I've been in relationships with energy vampires, I almost want to walk around with the tape recorder, because they manipulate things so well. You want to be able to play it back and go, no, I did say that. And you did say that. So I think the therapy is so great for the empath to just to have someone in your life who's a cheerleader and a validator for you, especially in those beginning stages of realizing you're in some type of a relationship with an energy vampire. But what her studies and research and knowledge as an MD doctor has proven is that therapy does not help these people. And I think we're going to talk about, specifically these types of energy vampires in a moment. And I think that's what terrifies me the most about studying borderlines and narcissists and antisocial and sociopaths and psychopaths is that there really is no quote unquote cure. There's no pill they can take. There's no therapy that can be done. They are who they are. And that is what I find most chilling.
Yes, I agree entirely. The last couple things on this list of recognizing a vampire in your life would be another thing I'm sure we've all experienced is just feeling so drained. You love and respect someone so much, but every time you're around them, you feel drained, depleted, tired. I had a situation, just to put a little personal thing in that, there was someone that I ran into a few weeks ago that I had forgotten how draining they were. And I came home and I felt like crap and I was sad and depressed. And I'm generally not I don't fall into that hole too often. And I just felt terrible. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, why didn't I see that connection? Because every single time I've run into this person or spent time with this person, it has taken me a couple days to get back on my feet. But to meet the person I'm speaking of, even as many times as I've gone through this, it still took me by surprise. So that's truly how amazingly manipulative and presenting and I'm just thinking, yeah, Denise, some psychic you are, you couldn't see it coming. But truly, it can be, and I like this person, I respect this person, but why do we forget? Why do we keep falling back and going back in that hole?
Well, I'd like to try to answer it because I don't think it's because you're not a good psychic, because that's
Thank you.
you. I think it's because we are empaths. And maybe it's because I was raised on a diet of fairy tales and Hallmark. I believe in a happy ever after. I believe in a happy ending. I believe that people can change.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seriously been having this debate with myself all summer. Like, is it, I'm such a natural optimist. No matter what happens in my life, I always think it's going to turn out okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's good or bad, because I have another friend who's a natural pessimist. Well, that's not true. A natural realist. And she and I have gone through very similar situations in our lives. And I watch how I react to that situation and how she reacts. And I feel that because I'm a natural optimist and I always hope that people are going to change or be different this time, every time I have that slap in the face awakening, it's like I fall farther each time.
Yes.
Whereas she, as a realist, is like, yeah, what do you expect? That's who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't have that fall into that sadness of, oh, they're never going to change. And so I think that's where that draining comes from. Not that you didn't get the heads up psychically to know this person is an energy vampire. I think being a psychic, being a medium, you have to be compassionate. You have to have this open heart. That's what makes you the intuitive you are. But it's a double-edged sword, because that compassion also leaves you sometimes vulnerable to these people. Yes. And I think that's where the draining comes into play, because we're healers too, and we want to just heal.
Right. And you nailed it. You absolutely nailed it, because it's seeing the best in people. It's wanting people to treat us the way we treat other people, and not to be, the pat on the back Mother Teresa stuff at all, but truly wanting to see that in someone. But we'll talk about the physical stuff in a little bit, but that was my heads up with this person, was my physical reaction, and my emotional reaction was so intense. That's perfect the way you worded that. And I think you're spot on, because we are very loyal. We're very loyal mm-hmm. people as empaths. Energy vampires generally don't want advice. They'll call a lot. They don't change, and they have a lot of drama in their life. But if you make a suggestion, they don't want to hear that, because they know everything. And the drama, feeding on the drama, and they'd have to look at the spiritual side of life, but I think they're often very afraid to, so they'll do distraction stuff to deflect that, because if you get too close to the fire, they're going to stir shit up so that you reflect it back onto you. So you end up feeling like it's all your fault, or that you did something wrong, or that whole miserable thing. So, and
she says that they create this drama just so they can get a hit of energy, good or bad.
Yes, an adrenaline junkie, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Or some of the students that I worked with in the past that had absolutely no impulse control. And I can remember years and years ago, I worked in a residential treatment facility, and I had this brilliant young man in my program. I mean, like off the chain how smart this kid was. And he used to take his thumbs and cut off his air supply to try to get a head rush. So he'd be like reading, and he'd take his thumbs and press the places in your neck, and he'd cut off his hair, so almost to the point of passing out. And then he'd just be like, whoa. And I said, why do you do that? He said, you get a really good rush, Miss Carell. And I thought, holy no. But it was that impulse.
That weird sexual thing that people have died from.
Yes.
That you could put me in some type of tantric class for 3 years straight, and I still would not understand that.
No, and we're not prudy women, but still, there's some stuff, and that was really an eye opener to me. That anyway,
they'll do anything for that hit of energy.
Yes.
Okay, so then she gives a checklist for: are you in a relationship with a vampire? And she says, here are some things to look for. Their hooks are in you, because in the beginning, the vampire is really good at figuring out what you want to hear, what you need to hear. They're really good at what's called love bombing you, and just, propping you up and making you feel like you're it on a stick. And that's how they get their hooks on you. They will never give you straight answers, even to simple questions. Oh my gosh, that is so true, is it not? You'll just say like, hey, what'd you do today? I don't know, stuff. Okay, like what? Work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, anything happen at work? No. They won't even reveal anything. They always have a need to win. And I think that's really important. That is something I have just realized in the last year about energy vampires. It's not about the relationship. It's not about love. It's not about loyalty. It's not about sadness. It's not about heartache over the relationship breaking up or their friendship ending. It's about winning.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. And energy vampires look at everything in black and white, and they look at everything as win or lose. I'm winning here or I'm losing here.
Right.
They cannot take no for an answer. They are aggressive or covertly aggressive to get their own way. So aggressive, I think we all know. Covertly aggressive is more of that, like, passive aggressive, like if your mom calls you and says, hey, can you do A, B, and C for me? And you say, no, I don't have time today, maybe this weekend. And they say, oh, that's okay. I'll just sit here alone looking out the window. They'll do that type of stuff. They tell lies that portray them in the best light, no matter what their situation or their part in it. They will, you in the relationship with the energy vampire will experience the stress of cognitive dissonance every time the vampire does something hurtful, especially after years of trying to fix the vampire. Now, cognitive dissonance, that's a hard term for me to understand, but she explains it in the book as, those stories that you tell yourself, we do it to ourselves. Like if you're dieting, for example, and somebody brings to work a plate of your favorite donuts, cognitive dissonance is saying, well, I'm just going to have one. And then you eat the donut, you go back to your desk, and then you're like, well, I can have one more. I just won't eat a lot at dinner. That's cognitive dissonance where that's a light example, but it's like where you're just not really being honest with yourself about what's happening.
Right.
The example she uses in the book is for smokers who, like, they know smoking isn't good for them, but they'll say to themselves, like, well, everyone in my family smoked and they all lived to be 90. What do doctors know? It's those lies we tell ourselves to get through the day.
I don't want to
And
add
that's
to
what
that or
fancy say.
survive the situation, because
Thank
sometimes if
you.
it's going for a long, long time with someone that's been draining you and telling you, because the other, and I don't know if she went into this in the book, but what that triggered a thought for me was how in their own right, a lot of energy vampires are very intuitive that when you're almost to your breaking point, they'll pull it out of a hat and tell you what you need to hear. So you stay hooked
Yes.
in, and you think,
Yes.
oh, why do I think that they're this or that? Look, you just did this for me, or she just remembered it was my birthday, or I mean, it might be whatever the example is that they do. They have like a radar on that I'm starting to lose my grip. I have to get back in there and start this cycle all over again.
Yes, I like that you added that addendum to it. That's really important. I have a friend who's just separating from her husband of 25 years and just waking up and realizing all of this. And so since I've been through my own divorce, she's really opened up to me. Maybe you guys think I'm like this, I don't know, fuzzy wuzzy friend, but I'm not. Like if someone's going through a hard time, I'm going to always tell them the truth. And I think she likes that about me. And so what she'll do now is she'll call me and she'll say, okay, I know he did this, but he's saying this now. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say to her, okay, what that means is he's lying. And then I remind her of all the other manipulations that he's gone through. And just the other night, she called me and she was like, I have a mother PhD and I can't see this. Like, she's like, what is wrong with me? Like, how am I not seeing this when it's right in front of my face? And she said, I need people like you and people like my pastor and my therapist to point it out to me. And so then she like beats herself up over that. It's
Right.
like a double beating. It's so frustrating. So anyway, I just want to say Dr. Northrup does talk about that in her book. She calls it malignant intuition, which I love that phrase.
Yes.
She said all energy vampires have malignant intuition. They know when they're losing you, and they don't look at it as, oh crap, I'm losing the love of my life, or I'm losing my best friend, or I'm losing this wonderful worker who's been loyal to me for 15 years. they don't look at it that way. They look at it as I'm losing. So just remember, everything is about winning and losing. And when they feel like that, they tap into their malignant intuition and they say exactly either what you need to hear in that moment to feel propped up and comforted and validated, or the opposite. They will trigger one of your vulnerabilities and one of your fears.
Right.
And their malignant intuition, I think what's key about that is their timing. That's why I think it's really important to have at least one friend that you can be really honest with and trust and tell all of this to, so that that friend can act as like your diary, your mirror, and say, no, remember this. Remember when this happened.
I want to add one more little caveat to that as well, that for a lot of people that are right in the thick of it, they've been so isolated or so controlled, or, I mean, if you throw in any substance abuse or codependency or other situations in addition to the energy vampire, you may feel conditioned. I'm really searching for words with this because I want to make sure I get the intent across as well, is that you may feel conditioned to not talk to people, to keep it secret, to keep it private, to nobody wants to hear this. You've been so worn down with it. But when you get on the other side of it, exactly what you're saying, and I can almost guarantee people will be horrified when they hear what you've been going through, because they have no idea, because you've hidden it so well as an empath.
Well, and what happens, because I've done this, is let's say you're in a relationship with an energy vampire and he or she rears his ugly head and takes the mask off, and you freak out and you tell a friend, and the friend is horrified. And then you go home and the energy vampire is nice as pie again. You know, Mr. Hyde is back, Dr. Jekyll is gone, or whichever one it is.
Right.
And then you feel guilty for talking about your partner to a friend. Like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And then that cycle of secrecy continues. And so that's why I'm not saying you need to go on your very own podcast and share everything that's going on in your closet. You know, I mean, I've made a conscious choice to share some things about my relationship with my mother, because I do think it's the last taboo, and I do think it's important for me anyway to be a voice for people dealing with that energy vampire type in their life. But there are several other energy vampires in my life that I'm not comfortable, publicly sharing the pain and manipulation and whatnot that I've gone through. However, I do have a couple of key friends that I have always shared this with, and I think that's so important, because the only way to blight out darkness is to shine a light on it.
Yes, I agree.
The other thing she says to know if you're in a relationship with an energy vampire is that you'll have a lot of stress dealing with the constant disappointment, the negativity, the walking on eggshells, the trying to fix someone, and the deception. She said it makes you increasingly susceptible to all kinds of immune problems. And Denise and I are going to go into that in detail in a little bit. She also says if we are in a relationship with someone who isn't in the relationship for healthy reasons, our wounds become activated. And she's talking about childhood wounds. And I was very surprised, because I've read a lot of Dr. Northrup's books, Denise, and they're always super informative, but she's a very private person. And I respect that.
Yes.
I don't know how to be a private person, obviously, but I respect it when people are. And I thought that she was very open in this book about her childhood wounds.
For a lot of us that are empaths, that are sensitive, we were groomed very beautifully to fall into relationships with energy vampires later in life.
Yes.
Because there's a familiarity to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And that's the key, is that familiarity. That's the key.
Right.
Do you remember, like, as a kid, like going to sleepovers and you'd be at someone's house and everything was like so perfect and happy and normal, and thinking, oh, they will not get me.
Yeah.
Like, do you remember, like, I really remember thinking that. And when I was in high school, there were 6 of us in our little group, and 3 of us had lovely dysfunctional families, and three of us had happy, normal, functioning families. And it was so interesting to watch the 3 of us that came from dysfunctional families bonded like nobody's business. And then the 3 that came from functioning families bonded. Right. We all stuck together and we all hung out, But when it came to calling someone in the middle of the night, it was just divided that way, because I think we recognize, oh, you'll get it. If you come to my house and my eyes are bloodshot teary because my mom's been screaming at me all morning, you're not going to judge or be freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
So that familiarity, I think, breeds you to attract energy vampires.
And also for a lot of, I just had a flash of this woman I'd known her since elementary school, and we worked together in high school. We both worked at the local hospital and in the food service and all these things, and I had never been to her house. I went away to school, we were still friends, and then one day she will meet me at my house. So I went and I knocked on the kitchen door, and she will come on in, and I had no idea her father was a raging alcoholic. No idea. She had hidden it, and I knew this woman well. We'd known each other for years. She was so incredibly gifted at hiding that aspect of her life. And he was incredibly inebriated at the time and doing some things that my heart broke for this friend, because her father was, just so, bottom line, he was just so drunk, he was making a complete ass out of himself. And she looked, and I remember this to this day, and we're talking a long, long time ago, and our eyes locked, and it was almost like, now you get it. And it changed me. It completely changed me. And it also triggered that empathy and compassion. But the sad part was, after that, our friendship was different, because I think it left her in such a vulnerable place that someone knew that deep, dark secret. So I think that that's another part to it, that some of us that have been in horrific family of origin situations, or even as adults, because some folks, they do great in their family of origin and then end up with the energy vampire. And I think it almost brings on second childhood stuff, that you have to still deal with that shit like you're a little kid.
Well, listen to this. She says in her chapter, The Wounds We Came to Heal, she says 90% of our wounds and the subsequent behaviors that come from them are programmed into us before the age of 7.
Yes.
And she says, when we are shamed as children for being who we really are, we doubt ourselves, and we become driven by an insatiable need to prove our worth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty powerful.
Yes. And it goes back to the Anna Judith stuff with the charge in the energy body, of how she delineates all those times in childhood that things get energetically stuck in you, that correlates beautifully.
Yeah,
the
it
timeline.
Really does. It really does. Okay, so let's talk about the specifics of the types of energy vampires you can meet. They really are, I think they're called cluster Bs of personality disorders. The first one is called the antisocial energy vampire. And this is someone who will lie or cheat. They have a disregard for their own and others' personal safety. They violate the rights of others. They refuse to take responsibility for their actions. They're aggressive, impulsive, and sometimes violent. So a lot of times we'll hear these and go, oh, that's pretty extreme. But I want to give some examples of how it's not, everything is a spectrum, and so some of these are on a spectrum. I had a good friend, our kids were really, really good friends, and she realized that her husband had a little bit of this antisocial stuff, and it was little things that he would do, like whenever he drove the kids around, he never made them wear a seatbelt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that sounds minor, but I think that's kind of a big thing. Mm-hmm. And it would really piss her off, and he would project it onto her, like, what? I'm going down to the store. If he'd take them in the car, they'd go to the store, and he'd leave them in the car with the car running and go into the store.
Oh.
No seatbelts on, doors unlocked. Like, I get it. Like, that's not, but that's part of that antisocial stuff. And those little things, which really, as a mom, that's a big thing. But anyway, those can lead to bigger things. For example, the reason why those two are divorced now is she came home from picking her kids up from school one day, and there was a sheriff at the door. And she said, "May I help you?" And he said, "Yeah, your house is in foreclosure." And she had no idea. He was an incredibly wealthy man, made a lot of money, and had lost it all and lied to her. So those little antisocial things like, lying about putting seatbelts on the kids or having no regard for their safety, those are usually symptoms of much bigger things coming down the road. I have another friend who realized that her husband was living like a totally different life, like had a whole secret life. He traveled all the time for work. And so, she had no idea really what he was doing when he was traveling, and found out that it was, a lot of other stuff. And when she went through his background, he had lied about going to college.
Wow.
And so oftentimes you'll find these little things like, oh, well, when she confronted him about it, he was like, well, I didn't want you to think bad of me that I only did 1 year of college.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's a lie.
Right.
So antisocial, I think we think of that and we think of Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy. But what I want people to understand is that it's a spectrum, and there are energy vampires that are antisocial. And when you have this personality type, you also tend to not keep, form, and maintain close relationships.
Right.
And I think that's important. If you're in a relationship with an energy vampire, look at all of your friends and ask, did I make this couple friend, or did my partner make this couple friend? Am I maintaining this friendship, or is my partner maintaining this friendship? Because antisocial people tend to not really know how to maintain friendships. Do you want to add anything to that before I move on?
No, I love that you brought in that part about the couples and the friendships, and because that's another whole minefield for a lot of empathic people, is staying in relationships with couples that may not be healthy for them, but they feel obligated to be in them because of the partner person.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
The other type is called borderline personality disorder. Most of these are women. And, I've done a lot of reading on borderlines. A lot of the new research, I've read a couple of articles by, I think it's Robert Hare, who did like the definitive research on psychopaths.
Mm-hmm.
He was saying that a lot of psychologists had a hard time calling a woman a psychopath in the early stages of understanding what this personality disorder was. And so they called them borderline personalities. But a lot of research, and again, I am not a trained therapist or anything, so any one of you listening to this who's a psychologist, please email me if I'm getting this wrong. But I've read a lot of articles where they're starting to say borderline are more like sociopaths than the other cluster Bs. It's like a nicer term because most borderlines are women. Mm-hmm. They tend to engage in risky behavior like unsafe sex or gambling or stealing, binge drinking, or binge eating. They will often threaten suicide. And I think this is an important delineator for these types of energy vampires. Borderlines are the ones of the other type of cluster Bs that will threaten suicide. They will not follow through on it. It's a threat. It's like a manipulation that they tend to hold over you. They use intermittent reinforcement, which is very difficult to deal with, which means, they'll prop you up on that pedestal that they built. And once you're sitting up there and feeling awesome, they knock that pedestal down. And so it's that lack of consistency that makes borderline so difficult to deal with. I've often said, like, if every time you came home, your partner beat the crap out of you, you'd be out of there. I think that some women and some men stay in these abusive relationships, whether it's physical or emotional, because of this intermittent reinforcement, where one time you get the great, happy partner, and then the next time you get the mean, manipulative one, and then the next 5 times you get the happy, loving one. And it's that back and forth that Dr. Northrup says really helps keep the hooks into you. And she says, this is a quote, "Men who stay with these borderline women end up like empty husks on the side of the road."
Ooh.
Yeah, that made me sad to read. That's a sad little sentence. She said borderlines love to pit people against each other. So oftentimes it's a phrase maybe you all have read in codependent research. It's called triangulation, where they'll put 2 against 1. So for example, let's say, as a random example, you have a mother with borderline. She might put 2 sisters against the other. And then the next year, that sister that she encouraged the other 2 to attack, now she's the favorite. And then the other, so it switches. It's not like constant. It's that intermittent reinforcement. And they tend to gain power by pitting people against each other. She says that what's at the root of a borderline is they feel deeply empty inside. She said the Buddhists call them hungry ghosts. And I did some research on that because I read about hungry ghosts and years ago, and everything I read about hungry ghosts was, the paranormal stuff, that there's these ghosts that are hungry for energy and light, and they go around and they steal it from humans that are alive. But when I started researching it in relation to what she was talking about, the hungry ghost I had read about was more of a metaphor for these energy vampires. They're like a ghost of a human. They're not truly human in that they can't feel compassion and empathy and love for others and for themselves, which, okay, here's the rub. Because, Denise, when I read stuff like that, what's my first instinct? I feel bad for them.
Right.
That's my kryptonite.
But that's always our default position as empaths.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. She said that borderlines have intense anger and can be manipulative. So the tricky thing with borderlines, if you've ever dealt with one, they can be so loving, so fun, so charming, and then the next moment, angry, manipulative, or sad. That's I think for children of borderlines too. There's lots of great books, like Walking on Eggshells is a good one. Healing Daughters of Mothers with Narcissistic Personality Disorder, Healing Daughters of Mothers with Borderline. There's a lot of good books out there about children who were raised with borderlines. But I think that's the trickiest thing for the kid is you can't pattern it. You can't say, oh, well, on the full moon, she goes a little crazy. Or if I don't clean my room, I know, he's going to come home in a rage. You can't pattern it. You can't track it. And that's what keeps the children, especially, I think, of borderlines, on edge all the time.
I've often used the expression, you don't get lukewarm. You get hot or you get cold. You get warm, loving, supportive kind, or you get kind of mean as a snake. And there's no in between, and you never know which one's going to pop up.
Exactly. Now, the other type of personality disorder energy vampire is called histrionic. And these are the people who love attention. They love drama. They tend to be sexually promiscuous. They have strong opinions, rapidly changing emotions. They have excessive concern over their appearance. They believe their relationships are stronger than they are. So I don't think that they are as controlling and angry as the borderline. I think histrionics are actually harder to pinpoint in my experience. I only have had one friend that fits this description. And, normally very, very nice, but the main thing is the drama. Like, they always have a problem and they always need it fixed. When you offer the solution, it's never taken.
Right.
The belief that their relationships are stronger than they are, that's really hard, especially if you're in a friendship with a histrionic energy vampire, because maybe you've met them for coffee a couple of times. Maybe you've had them over for dinner once. And then they call you a couple of times when you're really, really busy, and you text back, a crazy week, I'm so sorry, can I call you next week? That's enough for them to shut that friendship down or create a whole fight. And you're like, hello? What's going on here? And they can be confused with narcissistic personality disorder because they do tend to have that excessive concern over their appearance. These are the ones who have their plastic surgeon on speed dial or go to have 3 gym memberships because they believe that their worth is in their appearance. How do they look? How does their house look? How do their kids look? It's all about the show.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, there's the narcissistic personality disorder. And these are the people who fantasize about power, sex, and fame. They feel superior. They believe they are entitled. They don't recognize the needs of others. They exaggerate their achievements. They have high demands and give nothing in return. They expect special treatment. They are jealous of others, and they believe everyone is jealous of them. I think these are easy to recognize. Denise, have you ever done any waitressing?
Yes.
In your life?
As a waitress and a bartender for years.
Don't you think that's a wonderful job for understanding personalities?
It is. You have contact with every member of society.
You really do. And I could spot the narcissistic restaurant person a mile away when in my short sojourn into waitressing in college. I was a really bad waitress. But I could spot them a mile away. And here's an example that just happened to me this week. I have a good friend in my neighborhood, and we both have had discussions over relationships that we've had with energy vampires in our life. And we had a new neighbor move in recently, and she came over when I was getting my mail, and she said, "Hey, I met the new neighbor." And I said, "Oh, tell me, what are they like?" And she goes, "Well, I feel like my ex-husband just moved in next door." I said, "Why? What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, the realtor told me that he was a veteran." So I thought, my neighbor's very patriotic and all of that. And so she said, I went over and I said, "Hi, my name is so-and-so. Welcome to the neighborhood. I hear you're a veteran. Thank you so much for your service." And he said, "Oh, you're welcome." And she said, "Where did you serve?" And he said, "Black Ops, ma'am. I'm not allowed to speak about that."
Sorry.
And we just burst into laughter because she has people in her family who have been Army Rangers and Navy SEALs and true Black Ops shit. Like, you know what I mean? She is a military brat. She knows what it means to be in Black Ops. And it's like, I told her, I said, it's like Fight Club. I love that movie so much. You can do a whole therapy session on that movie. But anyway, when Brad Pitt says the first rule of Fight Club, there is no Fight Club. That's the first rule of being in Black Ops. You don't tell people. So, yes, a narcissist has moved into our neighborhood. But here's the thing. I think reading these descriptions of the cluster B personality disorders and really learning them yourself, it's like storing your energy vampire gun with garlic. Do you know what I mean? It's such a helpful way to spot these people.
Yes.
If you know what to look for.
And to validate that you're not crazy, or that you're not making stuff up in your head, or that you're not overreacting, that it is a genuine thing and there is a name for it.
Yes. So we're going to talk about the health implications of being in a relationship with an energy vampire. But first, we just want to take a little break and tell you about a webinar that Denise and I have coming up, and then we'll get back into the book discussion. Denise and I are almost halfway through our mediumship webinar, and it's been such a joy, such a great group of men and women that have joined us. We really loved doing it. So we're going to be offering it again during the day. As we mentioned to you all, we got a lot of great feedback. A lot of you want a daytime webinar. And so we're going to be starting our daytime webinar August 31st. And that's going to meet from 12 to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we were thinking if any of you are on the Pacific Coast, maybe you could just go to work a little late that day. Or maybe some of you have Fridays off. But that's going to run 4 consecutive weeks starting on Friday, August 31st at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And just as a reminder, the mediumship webinar class is for people who already have an understanding of what intuition is, what their chakras are. This is a class to really teach you how to do mediumship. So each week you get, 30 pages of handouts? It's a lot.
A lot of handouts, yes.
A lot of handouts. You get a lot of information on the different topics that we cover in that month with you. You get a weekly meditation. You get at least 1, sometimes 2 personal exercises to determine mediumship for yourself. But my favorite part of these webinars is that each week you are partnered up with someone else and you get to practice mediumship. And, I've taught the Be Your Own Psychic class for several years now, and at least 2 of the exercises I do in there are mediumship in nature, but this is the first time I've taught this webinar where every single partner exercise is mediumship in nature. And Denise, I think you can concur that we've been blown away by the accuracy of what people have been getting.
And I have to agree with everything you just said, and truly, we've been so blessed with the group of people that decided to do this. It's fun. I'm enjoying the hell out of it. I'm really enjoying getting to know people and hear their stories, but also just, and we say this a lot, and it's true for me, is that when we asked a couple questions on the initial class and people were realizing, oh my gosh, these people are like me. We're all wired. We're all mediums in different ways. And it was just nice to see that community building from such an early part of the webinar.
Well, and it's funny because I don't think any of them know this about everyone else because I didn't want to say it on the webinar, but I'd say 3/4 of them emailed me before they signed up and said, I don't even know if I have mediumship ability.
Yes.
I don't want to take away from my partner experience because I might have nothing.
Yes.
And these people are coming back with names and date. Remember last week someone got the exact date of the grandmother's passing? Like not, fall, but September 28th. Like that was so cool. So anyway, we really love doing this, and we love just being a forum to show you all that everyone can do this, that this isn't magical or mystical. It's an ability. And so that's going to be Fridays, August 31st.
I just want to put one more little quick piece in that, is that I love that some people are strongly clairaudient, some people are clairvoyant, some people are clairsentient, but this group work, the teaching that we do, we're not specifically saying, oh, if you don't see it. Like everyone is raising their own strengths and realizing it doesn't matter which clair you're coming from, they're all equally important and valid.
Exactly. Yeah. And we're teaching them how to strengthen the ones they don't use, but how to also rely on and honor the ones you naturally have.
Yes.
So it's just it's a really cool webinar. We're really proud of the work we're doing, and we just want to keep doing it. So that's going to be Fridays, and that will be on our Facebook page and on our websites. We do it on Zoom, and I just wanted to say a little bit about that too. It's on Zoom. You can do it from your computer or you can do it from your phone. Every time I do a webinar, I have at least one person who takes the webinar in their car.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually because either they have little kids or they just don't want their family to know they're taking this weird class. And that's totally fine. So you can do it on your computer, you can do it on your phone. If you don't like the idea of being on video, I have two things to say about that. One that I love, Zoom has a glam up button. I told you about that, didn't I?
But I forgot. Oh, I'm going to play
it's got a little glam up button, and it softens all your features, so that's really nice. But if you still don't like being on video, you can just join by audio. Because, some people are shy, and we get that. Denise in particular, I'm a little bit more forceful. Like I'll say, does anyone want to share a question or an experience? But Denise is very nice. She's like, if you don't want to share, you do not have to share. So it's so we don't make you all talk and show your face unless you want to. But it is a safe, comforting community of like-minded thinkers that we are working hard to create.
And it's fun.
And it is. It's very, very fun. Yes, and tonight, when we teach our class tonight, I get to talk about spooky stuff. So very excited about that. Most of it is all sorts of lovely, fun stuff about connecting with your guides and your loved ones. But tonight I get to talk about protecting yourself from spooky stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the show?
Yes.
All right, so let's talk about the health implications of being in a relationship. And we're not just talking about a husband, a wife, a partner, a daughter, a son, a mother, a dad. We're talking about coworkers, best friends, and neighbors. So anyone that you have consistent interaction with that is an energy vampire, Dr. Northrup has pointed out in her book that there are scientifically proven health complications. Do you want to talk about what some of those are?
From my own personal experience, when I was in the depths of a terrible, terrible situation, I suffered severely from migraine headaches to the point where I needed to get medication for it. And it was very concerning, and it was bad. It was really bad. And when I chose to step away from that situation, like magic, the migraines stopped. So something that had been debilitating in my life for like at least once or twice a week, I'd have severe migraines. And then after that situation ended, I think there were 2 in a 15-year period. So it can be that extreme. One of the things that she talks about in the book, and that we also briefly talked about on the episode, was that midriff weight gain, because your solar plexus and also your body will produce that cortisol in a high stress situation. So to protect yourself, you might build a little bit of a buffer zone in your mid area with weight, and also the cortisol, the weight increase, all of that stuff. It's a buffer zone for empathic people to, I'm invisible, leave me alone. If I'm not desirable, I won't have to deal with people kind of stuff. But there is actual physical reaction that happens to hold on to that weight, because I know folks they're dieting, they're exercising, they're going to the gym, they're walking 5 miles, and they can't shake that weight. It could be more of, empathically, you're using it as a protection thing, which I thought was very interesting.
I did too. She also says that typical health effects from being around energy vampires include adrenal fatigue, thyroid disorders, diabetes, breast cancer, irritable bowel syndrome, and autoimmune disorders. She said a lot of this results from being in toxic shame, that the energy vampire keeps you in toxic shame. Now, I asked her to talk in detail about the Tibetan monk experience, so I won't go into it in detail here, but I did want to mention it in case you all missed next week's show. This really has changed my life, seriously, reading about this Tibetan monk example. There was a doctor who was researching diabetes and why some people get diabetes and why some don't. And so he was looking at a variety of trigger points like culture, diet, physical health, spiritual health, all of that, and trying to plot if there was a certain demographic that would get diabetes over another demographic. And he kept coming up with these Tibetan monks that are off the charts with their diabetes, and he couldn't figure it out. Why are these Tibetan monks, who clearly have a well-balanced diet, are mentally and spiritually balanced, why are they getting diabetes? And he was able to prove through science that when we go from shock to forgiveness and bypass anger, it's physically unhealthy for your body. He says that we have that innate fight or flight in our body. We all know that. And when someone does something awful to you, you go into that fight or flight mode when you get angry. You have to get angry. It's what's in us. It's what protects us. It's what keeps us alive. When the Tibetan monks, their whole culture, their whole religion is trained to teach them to bypass anger and go straight to forgiveness. And Dr. Northrup explains that what this does is it infuses your body with a chemical that is very similar to morphine. When you go right to forgiveness and you do the forgiveness meditations and you send the perpetrator love, it infuses your body with these endorphins that numb the pain, that numb the anger, which that's great. That feels wonderful, right? However, your cells are still in that fight or flight mode going, hello, what do we do now? And it makes the cellular membrane get really, really thin, which increases cortisol. And it also increases your, what's the sugar thing that makes diabetes? Starts with an I. Insulin, thank you.
Yep.
And so it makes the insulin go off the charts, which makes you get diabetes. Denise, I found that mind-blowing because I do have anger. And I can't tell you how many times I have sat with my therapist, Dr. Bennett, and said, okay, I'm righteously angry about this. And it's like a hot potato because I'm a spiritual person. I'm not supposed to be angry. So what do I do with this hot potato? Like, what do I do with this anger? And he's always like, well, you got to feel it. But as a spiritual person and as an empath, I think we're also trained, you're not walking your spiritual path if you're angry. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Northrup says pretty bluntly in this book, that is bullshit. Right. And anger is as important and healthy and validating an emotion as forgiveness. And you need to process the anger before you go to forgiveness. And I think empaths and intuitives all around need to hear that.
And I think that's a big cause of, and this wasn't a specific, but I really think a lot of heart disease links from holding that anger in, especially if you've been betrayed or hurt or humiliated and you don't process it through an angry place to get on the other side of it. It can clog up in your heart chakra area and cause, circulation, heart disease, which again goes with the diabetes as well as far as circulation and flow in your life.
Well, she talks too. She said and I'd love to know if you agree with this, because I thought, I never thought of this. She said if you see a couple that's really mismatched, like one is super healthy and trim and looking very vibrant. And the other partner is overweight and sallow and yellow skin and bloodshot eyes, downtrodden, what have you. She said that's usually an energy vampire empath relationship, because the energy vampire sucks all the health out of the empath. And so the energy vampire looks great and the empath does not.
Mm-hmm. Which is not saying if you look great and you're in a relationship with the energy vampire that you're the vampire. No.
That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I don't know that that's an absolute. Some of the things that she said in the book, I was like, I don't know.
But it does physically, mentally, spiritually wear you down to the point where you may not even recognize it, but someone else that loves you or knows you or hasn't seen you in a while, when you start to come out the other side of it, it's like, oh my gosh, you look 10 years younger, or your eyes are so clear now, or you seem like you're having fewer issues with your back. I mean, all of those things, they truly do start to go away once you are able to address cutting that source of all your energy going to that other person, sucking the life out of you.
Right. She says on her chapter on the health risks, she says Dr. George Solomon, a pioneer researcher in the field of psycho-uro-immunology, taught that the immune system has morals. It responds in a positive way to righteous anger, the kind of anger that is natural to feel when our innocence or that of another is threatened. Our immune systems won't let us get away with bypassing our difficult emotions if we want to remain healthy. Anger is, after all, the appropriate response when you are being abused. Suppressing it is the health risk.
Mm-hmm.
And so she says that these Tibetan monks are literally sugarcoating their anger, and diabetes is the result.
Whole mind body thing, which I love. I love that connection.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I delve into that, it fascinates me to no end how, and I say this a lot, and I apologize for repeating myself, just what a barometer this physical shell really is for what's going on in our lives.
Well, I'm talking too much, and so we're running out of time. So let's quickly go through some of the solutions that she talks about. She talks about how to recognize healthy love. Do you have your notes on the 5 A's?
Oh, yes. The 5 A's for healthy relationship, and number 1 would be attention. And one of the things she's a big component of mirror work with these 5 A's, and to look and actually validate to yourself, I see you, but giving yourself the attention you deserve and attention to what's actually going on. And with that, it can be visualizing pulling off a blindfold or taking off rose-colored glasses. But the attention piece is really, really important. And to say to yourself, I see you, which the Louise Hay version would be to look in the mirror and say, I love you. I really, really love you, and make eye contact with yourself in the mirror. The second one would be appreciation. I value you, because for many empaths who have been, sucked dry by an energy vampire, you've lost your sense of self, you've lost your sense of value, or you may become, a workaholic or a perfectionist or something else to try to prove that you still have value. And this is more about being valued just because you're on the planet and who you are as a human being. Appreciation, approval, and the phrase you can use is I accept you. And I think for many, that's also a real trigger point of not feeling accepted, of feeling ostracized, of not feeling good enough. So when you can work on that acceptance, and when someone in a relationship with you accepts you just the way you are, whether you are on top of your game or in your worst mood ever, if someone is truly accepting you, that's a rare and beautiful gift, especially for people who have been in abusive relationships with energy vampires. Affection, if this is something that someone has used against you, either withholding affection or manipulating affection, but this goes back to what I said earlier, saying I love you, and truly, and when someone tells you I love you, that you feel it as well as hear the words. And allowing, the phrase would be I trust you. So look in the mirror and say I trust you. Because from my own experience, from other people, from a lot of folks that I've talked to, that I think is one of the most key points we need to talk about in this, is learning to trust yourself again. Because as an empath, as a naturally sensitive person, as an intuitive, I honestly think it's that much harder, because we almost think, well, why couldn't I see that? Why did I ignore it? Why did I allow that to happen? because we would see it in someone else, but when it's happening to us, it's almost like we have a fog around us. So learning to trust yourself again and slowly learning to trust other people. And that's a big, big work. So the fives would be attention, appreciation, approval, affection, and allowing for healthy relationships.
And I think it's so interesting because I've always said I have my 5 A's, I think it's 4 or 5 A's, where I will end a relationship, and that's abuse, abandonment, adultery, and addiction.
That's a good list. There was a
one. But I always had that in my mind, like those are my A's that, if you break one of those, you're out. And I never thought of turning it on to the positive. Like you have to have these 5 A's to be in a relationship with me. So I love that it's a positive way of looking at it, not only for yourself, but in your relationship. Does this person give me attention? Does this person appreciate me? Does this person approve of who I am? Does this person give me affection? Does this person allow me to be who I am? And you can think about it in ways, like, are they invested in my life? I did not want to ask Dr. Northrup about this story because she's so personal. But I've been a fan of hers for years, and I always watched her when she came on Oprah. And years ago, she came on the Oprah show, and she briefly talked about her divorce. And Oprah said, when did you know you were, going to leave this marriage? And she said, well, Oprah, you have something to do with it. And she said, when I was first on your show, that's a big deal. I mean, me personally, I think being on the Oprah show was like better than winning the Powerball. So Dr. Winthrop said, I came home from Chicago. I was so excited. I'd been on the flippin' Oprah Winfrey show. And she said that her husband was sitting on the couch watching TV, and she walks in from the airport, and he goes, hey. And she said, hi. And he goes, what's for dinner?
That's so sad.
And that's what, I know. But I mean, I totally can relate and get to that. People will often say to me, I get emails a lot from people saying, like, thank you for sharing your struggles with, your family of origin. And I can't believe how honest you are on the show. Trust me, sometimes I can't either. But here's one of the reasons why I can be. My parents have never listened to one of my podcasts. Not one. They've never read one of the books I've written. There's just none of that. And I think sometimes you can look at your friendships, your personal relationships, your work relationships, and see and check it against these 5 A's. Are they invested in my life? Do they give me attention? Do they know what's really going on in my life? Do they appreciate the work I'm doing? Do they appreciate the stress I'm going through? Do they appreciate who I am as a person, when I'm in a good mood or a bad mood? Do they approve of what I'm doing for work? Do they approve of how I'm parenting? Do they approve of me as a soul? Do I get affection without expecting anything in return? Does it always have to be a give and take? And do they trust me? Do they allow me to be me?
And I just want to add in that I think it's so vitally important, and you just nailed it again, is that not only with our relationships, but our relationship with ourselves. Building that healthy relationship and rebuilding ourselves is so, so, so important to be able to open to having healthy relationships. And I'm going to the extreme with this of people who have family of origin, relationships, a toxic work environment. They've just gotten the trifecta in getting the life sucked out of them. That start with you and really work on these 5 things so that you can build into having healthier relationships and setting new boundaries with people that can't meet those 5 A's in your life.
Yes. And she talks about other physical ways you can recognize them. And she breaks it down so simply. And this one I really love. She said, pay attention to 3 areas of your body: your stomach, your heart, and your throat. If when that person's name shows up on caller ID on your phone, you feel something in the pit of your stomach, or your heart goes, ugh, or your throat tightens, that's a sign that you're dealing with an energy vampire. Or if after being with the energy vampire, you have stomach issues or chest pains or a sore throat or a tightness in your throat, those are signs that you've been with an energy vampire. She also talks about lots of different types of solutions, like the power of saying no, implementing the gray rock technique, where you just don't feed into their drama. If they start yelling or screaming or freaking out, you just become a gray rock and just, don't do anything. You don't feed that drama. You don't fan those flames. She talks about something called the broken ring technique, which I'm not really a fan of. This is where you mimic their manipulation. So if you have an energy vampire who, for example, always expects you to be there for them, but when you need them, they suddenly have a headache, or their kids are homesick and they can't get a babysitter and be there for you. She said you can mimic their broken wing technique, and when they need you, say, I have a cold, I can't come, I have a headache. Thinking about the 4 agreements, which I really try to live my life by, I can't do that one because it's not, being authentic with your word. Sometimes in the moment, you have to do what you have to do. So, no judgment. It's a technique. It has worked for her and it's worked for others. But she talks about a lot of metaphysical techniques in this book too, which I really loved and got a lot from.
But I love this topic because it's so central to everything else that we talk about is based on this in so many ways, is the boundaries
It really is.
of identifying, of the self-acceptance, of truly, again, with the things in the book, the techniques are what I absolutely loved because they're things you can do, they're free. You can do them with people, you can do them privately. I just love, love, love that aspect of the book.
I do too. Lots of solutions, lots of focus on the empath rather than the energy vampire. So we hope you do tune in next week, where I promise it won't be a repetitive of all of this, because you get to hear Dr. Northrup's point of view and her examples, which are really illuminating. We thank you so much for tuning in each week. We really have just enjoyed growing this community of enlightened empaths. We're working on some really exciting shows coming up besides the Dr. Northrup one. We're going to be doing a show on the empath and earthbound. And we're also getting ready for our show, our monthly Q&A show, our Community Connections. So if you have questions or stories you'd like to share, please email them to us at enlightenedempaths@gmail.com, or you can just message us on Facebook. We are on Facebook at Enlightened Empaths, and we will share them on the show and answer them that way. Please, if you like the show, subscribe to us on iTunes, tell a friend, and leave us a review. Denise and I read all the reviews, and we really appreciate that feedback as well. And don't forget that our next mediumship webinar is starting on Friday, August 31st at noon. In the meantime, we hope you've enjoyed this show. We hope you have a beautiful, happy, joyful week. Don't forget to show up, do great work, and share your light. Bye-bye, everyone.